And now a moment created by our underwriter, AARP. And for that, I'm pleased to welcome to the stage Joanne Jenkins, Chief Executive Officer at AARP, and Myrna Blyth, Editorial Director at AARP Media, rather. Myrna, the floor is yours, and welcome Joanne as well.
I think we should sit like this. Thank you. And I know today's summit's objective is to develop a collective vision for meeting American housing needs. I also know, obviously, AARP is very, very interested in this issue. So, Joanne, can you tell us a little about AARP's focus and also about livable communities, our vision for livable communities?
Well, thank you, Myrna, and thank you all for coming this afternoon. Absolutely, AARP has been at the forefront of the conversations around housing and what should the home of the future look like, but more importantly, how should communities be designed that are, in my estimation, ageless. So we're not just building a community to fit the needs of the 50 and older, which AARP is particularly interested, but we're really trying to create intergenerational communities that not only are good for the old, but are also good for the young. You know, I often talk about whoever came up with the step up going to the house, when if we had the flat entrance, it would be just as good for the wheelchair as it would for the young mother with a stroller or having to take groceries in the house. And how do we start thinking about building out communities that are really living the way people are living their lives? To that end, our Public Policy Institute really this past year launched the Livability Index, which is a index designed around 60 different factors in 7 segments around housing affordability, access to transportation, community engagement, working in the communities. And so now you can go into the aarp.org/livability index, type in your zip code, and you can see how livable your own community is. I know mine is a 51 out of 100, so I think it's a great factor.
Believe it or not, in New York City, I live in one of the most livable communities in the United States, which shocked me because it has transportation. And it has access to health care. And even though real estate may be expensive, in so many other ways, Absolutely. It is a livable community. And frankly, you can see that on the street where you see both people with walkers and people with strollers. Lots of twins with strollers, as a matter of fact, in the community I live in. But anyways, and tell us a little more about livable communities and the whole concept and how much we've done with livable communities.
Absolutely. So really the concept is, how can we create communities that allow us to live and age in our communities, but also have the interaction with both the young and the old, that has community engagement, that people are involved, they have access to transportation, they have access to work. We know that particularly with the boomers and certainly with the millennials, they want to live and work within 5 to 10 minutes of where they live. So transportation is a huge issue there. We also know quality of health and health, as you mentioned, quality, access to health care is important. And so as we think about not just the housing of the future, we really need to go beyond just the housing structure and think about how do we design communities that allow people to age and live where they want to live, not where, I hate to say it, HUD or some other federal agency decides this is where some senior housing ought to be.
Interesting. I also know the foundation, AARP's foundation, and our colleagues are here from both the Public Policy Institute and the foundation, of course, are especially interested in this issue. Recently, they released a report, the AARP Foundation Harvard Joint Center of Housing Studies report. And can you share some of the findings?
Absolutely. So this was very important information coming out of it, because one of the things that we found out is that, and I think we at AARP have been thinking this for a long time, that 9 out of 10 people over the age of 65 say they want to age in their own home. We also know that over 30% of people who are age 65 and older are spending over 30% of their income on housing, and 50% of those are spending over 50%. So that's very key for how do we think about Social Security and Medicare and other costs of living this extra 20 or 30 years that this increased longevity is bringing to us, and that in the current housing market here in this country, only 1% is designed using the livability standards for creative housing design that we know are so important to having a good community. And so these were important findings that was recently released, and as we think about what communities and housings ought to look like in the future, you know, I often say that, and make sure that we make out the point that 10,000 people a day are turning age 65, and that's going to happen every day for the next 15 years. 10,000 a day for the next 15 years. And as we think about who's going to be buying those houses or renting those houses, so important that we ought to be creating structures and livable communities that are addressing the needs of the 50 plus, but also thinking about this is where I want to live my complete life, not just for 10 or 20 years and then move to another community. And so I think that's very important for us as we, all of us who are concerned about the future of housing in this country, to think about who's going to be renting or buying or living in these houses that we're creating, whether they're mega houses or small one-bedroom apartments.
I've been involved in media for over 40, now over 50 community, and I've always said the newest story on earth is a mass of people growing older. Mm-hmm. That's never happened before. A mass of people all over the world. And we're pioneers, this generation. So think of those pioneer cabins. Absolutely. These are the homes of this population as we move forward. Really, it is pioneers. And the housing is pioneer housing for the mass of people and the future of people growing older. All right, I know that tomorrow AARP Foundation with Home Matters and Wells Fargo will announce the Redefining Home Today and Home Tomorrow contest. Give us a sneak preview of this really interesting contest.
Well, we're very excited about it, and Lisa Ryerson, our president of our foundation, is here, and she'll be talking a little later today. But this is a collaboration where we're actually going to be working with these other two organizations to put out a challenge to the architectural design folks across the country to help us design and rehab and existing housing to help meet the needs of the 50 plus. And Wells Fargo has identified the house in Memphis, Tennessee. So the winning design will actually be used on that house in Memphis that will create the what we're calling our livable house for the 50 plus in the future. And so it really is about creative design work and also affordability and convenience inside the home for us to be able to live much longer lives.
And we hope, I hope someone's here from HGTV. That's all. And you can talk to Lisa right now. There's also, I understand, another contest, an Aging in Place $50,000 challenge.
Absolutely. We're also going to be issuing that same challenge out to this whole startup community. You know, one of the things that we talk about at AARP is that we need to challenge outdated beliefs about what it means to be 50 and older in this country and come up with innovative solutions. And this will be a $50,000 challenge to startups to come up with innovative solutions that allow people to age in place in their own homes. And so we're very excited about the work that the AARP Foundation is doing. Much of their work is around 4 areas of hunger, housing, income, and isolation, and all of those things fit together. And we're particularly focused on, in our foundation, about meeting the needs of the low-income, vulnerable across this country. And we cannot forget that there are those in this country who are far less fortunate than us. And so these are 2 unique opportunities that we're going to be presenting, really to spark the creative ideas and thinking, not only for government and individuals, but also for the private sector, to look at this 50-plus market as an opportunity. You know, I often talk about people who are 50 and older in this country generate $7 trillion of economic activity here in this country on an annual basis. And where else but Washington, D.C. would a $7 trillion economy be a problem rather than a solution? And we really do need to get Congress and the private sector to get engaged in coming up with products and solutions that help meet the needs of the 50 plus.
I mean, we call it the longevity economy,
yes.
And it would be the 3rd largest economy in the world, the United States, China, and then the 50 plus population of the United States. Really is amazing, really is amazing. All right, Joanne, I've been reading a very provocative book called Disrupt Aging. Your book.
Yes.
All right. And
It's a very good book, too.
It's
Myrna.
a very good book. Very good. It really is a very good book. And share with us how we're already disrupting aging in a variety of ways, in our lives, in our workplaces, and especially in our homes.
So Disrupt Aging is about challenging outdated beliefs in this country about what it means to be 50 and older, and really to spark new ideas in thinking about how do we get the private sector, actually I call it the 3 Ps, how do we take personal responsibility for living our best lives? How do we get communities and the private sector to come up with new products and solutions that allow us to live longer, healthier lives? And then how do we get the government, whether it's at the national or local levels, to get engaged in helping to create the kind of products and services and environment that allow people to choose how they want to live, not around how AARP wants them to live or the government wants them to live, but having them make the choices. And so this whole platform around Disrupt Aging is how do we start thinking about old problems and looking at new solutions for how we do that. You know, a perfect example of that is really this new Internet of Things. When I talk to the people at Uber and Lyft and Airbnb, most of them talk about that their whole business plan was built on the millennial community. And yet what they found in the last 3 to 5 years is their biggest customers are people who are 50 and 50 plus. Not only are they users of those services, but they're also drivers in Uber and Lyft. They're also the ones who own their own home and are able to participate in Airbnb. And so not only has it turned their business model upside down, but it's also created additional income for those in the 50 plus who had this asset, whether it was driving or whether it's a home, and now are using that to address their own isolation issues, creating more income, and also providing services and feeling that sense of purpose. And so the whole concept and idea around Disrupt Aging is to really think anew about the old problems that we've been facing in this country for years and to get everyone engaged, and also to challenge that idea around people who are 50 and older are only takers rather than givers. There are over 110 million people in this country who are over the age of 50. And they have enormous wisdom and experience, and they want to find purpose in their lives. And as Myrna said earlier, this increased longevity, you know, when Social Security was put in place some 80 years ago, the life expectancies was in the high 60s. Well, if you're in good health, you can assume that you're going to live well into your 80s. The fastest growing age segment in this country is people over the age of 85. And the second is people over the age of 100. So how many of you have planned for an additional 30 to 40 years of financial strength in your own savings? How have you looked at your housing that you're living in? How have you thought about where you want to live, where your extended family is going to live? And how do you think about that extra 20 or 30 years in which you're going to have to give to either work if you want to work? I often say pushed by pain or pulled by possibilities that we need to stay in the workforce, or whether or not it's something that you have an asset that you want to give back and you want to find some real meaning and purpose in life. And so the book is about how do we spark that kind of thinking individually in our community and in the private sector.
And as you can see, it is a very inspiring book that has meaning for people individually, for the society, and for the future. So anyways, thank you, Joanne.
Thanks
very much.
Thank you.